Good afternoon, good evening from depending on where you're joining from on this webinar. A very warm welcome to all of you who have already joined, and I can see there are more people joining in, but we'll go ahead and get started. A very warm welcome to this webinar on getting to the right OKR tooling, lessons from the trenches, brought to you by Nimble, and our motto being humanize work. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So just some quick introductions and housekeeping. So we'll start with some introductions. I'll give you a quick introduction to the company and products if you're not familiar with it. And then I'll hand over the session to our main speaker today for the main part of the session. At the end, we will do a Q&A session and hopefully have enough discussion to make this a very stimulating session. We are going to record the webinar and make the recording available to you. We'll take the questions via the Q&A portion of the Zoom panel that you should all see on the Zoom window. All right. So with that, let us get started. The main speaker for today is Avinash Rao, who is Vice President of Products at NimbleWork. And I'm Mahesh Singh. I'm co-founder and I run marketing at NimbleWork. I will leave it to Avinash to introduce himself further, but Avinash is a well-known figure in the lean agile industry and in the product engineering industry, and has done a lot of work around I would say, a range of fields, but especially in the area of lean agile implementations, OKR and strategy implementations, and he will certainly talk more about that. I will give you a quick introduction to the company, and then I will leave the floor open to Avinash. So, okay, I forgot about the fact that we have a slide on it. But Avinash, I'm going to leave this to you. So let's go past this, and I will continue with the company introduction. So NimbleWork, we used to be Digite. We just changed our branding in early March to NimbleWork, and we've been a company in the web-based work management, project management space for the last 20 years plus. And our customers include some of the largest corporations in the world with hundreds of thousands of users, and also very small teams, 20 to 50 people using our products for a wide range of work that they do. We are headquartered in Cupertino, California, and we have users and customers around the world. Just a quick a sort of smattering of some brands that you might recognize, and we have some of the most well-recognized brands in the world using our products, as well as, of course, smaller companies who use it for a variety of use cases. All right. So with that, I will give this over to Avinash. Avinash, a very warm welcome, and over to you.
Hey, thanks, Mahesh. Lovely to be here. Just looking for a quick confirmation, Mahesh, if you can see my slides and hear me.
Yes.
All right?
Go for it.
Okay, if you can't see me all right, that's okay. You're not missing too much. So we're speaking today about getting to the right OKR tooling, lessons from the trenches. Let me just minimize this just a little bit so that I have more space. Okay. What are we going to talk about? I'll start with a little bit about me. As Mahesh said, I'm VP of Products at NimbleWork, 22 years in IT. I'm a certified OKR coach, a certified DevOps coach, Kanban University KMP2 certified, and a certified product manager as well. That makes me appear like a robot who just goes around collecting certifications. So let me share one more slide. This is me. I love hiking and trekking. This is a photo of me last month where I did part of the Annapurna circuit. If that more than this slide, I think this slide is something that should inspire you to step out into the Himalayas. I'm hoping. We'll do a quick Slido before we begin. This is just to give you a sense, give me a sense of where you are in the OKR journey. So if you could please go to slido.com and enter that particular login code. You could also scan the QR code that's on your screen with your mobile phone, and it will take you directly to that particular page where you can, there's just one question. It's very simple. We just want to understand where you are in your OKR journey. And some of the things that I'm going to talk about and cover, we will spend a little more time or less time depending on the composition of the audience. I'm going to leave this up for a few more seconds, and then I'm going to head over to the Slido page where we can begin to see some of the results. Okay, so I see the votes are coming in. All right, so we've got 40% of people who are new here, 30% who are just starting, and another 30% who've read a little bit about OKRs. Okay, just give it a couple minutes more for you to get your votes in. Awesome, we have someone who runs the OKR program where they work. All right, so now that I have a sense of who we have on the webinar, let me go ahead. Obviously, I'm a product person, so I will tell a product story. So in a galaxy not so far away, and showing an absolutely deplorable lack of creativity, I'm talking about a company, ABC, that is implementing OKRs. And we have Melinda, who's leading the implementations of OKRs at ABC. Now, while to tell the story, I'm using Melinda as an example. What Melinda is a composite. We've obviously worked with a great number of varied customers who use our OKR solutions, and we've heard these problems, these stories from all of them, and I've put some of those examples together. So I do assure you that everything I'm talking about has actually happened, but not all of them have happened to the same person. Now, the people leading the OKR implementations in organizations come from a wide range of functions. One of our biggest users is actually a church in the US. So we have church officials who actually come and they say, hey, we are running this OKR implementation, and we're using the Nimblework tool in order to run the whole OKR program. They're actually extremely good and extremely professional in the manner that they run it. We also have a wide range of starting points and current processes. Now, a majority of people that we've worked with have come from working with coaches, and they take that help in order to come up to speed, get some of the trainings done, making sure they have the initial processes set up for the OKRs. And what they often also tend to do is get started on Excel sheets, because that's the easiest way to really get started. Before I dive into tools a little bit, I just want to talk about why OKRs, right? Especially for the people who are new and who are beginning with this journey. The OKR method focuses on the objectives that a business wants to achieve and how the objective will be measured via very clearly defined and enumerated key results. Once you make these outcomes visible, the thought process in the method is that it is much easier to create alignment. Otherwise, what happens is that projects and initiatives, which are managed by people with the designation of something and manager, project managers, program managers, marketing managers, sales managers, they do their absolute best to keep to track for the metrics that they are measuring. But the thing is that not always do these metrics directly reflect in the outcomes that businesses care about. So for example, there will be a marketing division, and the marketing division is running a campaign on LinkedIn, let's say, and they do a great job of the LinkedIn campaign. They've hired the right, they've got the right creatives, they've reached the right target audience, etc. But what the business really cares about isn't as much as the quality of the particular campaign, but an outcome, which is how many people really have signed up for the product or the service that is being offered via the campaign, right? And often that alignment is not per person. It's not only the marketing manager's campaign that results in that outcome, but multiple people who together have to work together for the outcome. The managers, though, are fairly focused on their own metrics. And that should appear pretty obvious, right? That your focus shouldn't be on activities, the focus should be on outcomes, and all of us should have our eyes on the prize, which is the outcomes that the organization is looking at. But that's actually very far from obvious if you just walk around the halls of ABC Corp. If you ABC as an example, I just realized a little while ago, I'm taking a 30-second scenic detour, that ABC Corp, ABC Inc., XYZ Corp, XYZ Inc. are all actually real companies, right? So I'm just taking ABC as an example here. If you walk around the hallways of our company, you will see that everybody is working in their independent silos and are being measured and rewarded for hitting certain metrics. Marketing people are measured and rewarded for hitting marketing metrics, and so on. Now, we need to change that just a little bit. And to make it more visual and visible, I have an example from the wartime. So while I have no inside knowledge or insight into how army leaders are set objectives, a reasonable expectation from a tank commander could be that I want 1,000 tanks at the border, right? But what the tank commander will do and how he or she will operate is very different if they are given an objective saying, I want this group of people, the tank commander, the Air Force, etc., to capture X territory in Y days. X and Y, again, reinforcing the fact that there's a abject lack of creativity in some of my naming. But that aside, an outcome definition that a group of people get together to capture X territory demands a different response and a different plan from I want 1,000 tanks at the border. I want this many planes flying over the border, right? In the absence of a very clearly defined outcome, what will happen is that the leaders will focus on their own metrics. And these are typically activity metrics. The second you shift from 1,000 tanks at the border to capturing enemy territory, you suddenly have to work with other people, and it introduces overheads. And it can sound like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, and it's actually critical to success. It introduces overheads of alignment, coordination, and adaptation. And what we need to do whenever we are thinking about OKRs is thinking about how we are going to get alignment, coordination, and adaptation, in addition to just making sure that we are planning, tracking, and updating our own objectives and key results. That brings us very nicely to OKR tools, right? Because Melinda and ABC are saying, let's define our OKRs, then we'll move them into a tool to track. That's how a lot of companies typically start. So they have a set of projects, they have a set of initiatives. Now the projects would run, but they didn't really move the needle on the business. There were 1,000 tanks at the border, but there was no enemy territory that was actually captured. So somebody, usually in senior management, hears about OKRs and say, you know what, that's because we're focusing on the activity metrics that are coming out of the projects and initiatives. We're not looking at the big picture. We're not focusing on the outcomes, and therefore we need OKRs. And obviously, if you need OKRs and you want to track them and execute them, you need a tool to track and update your OKRs. So how hard can it be, right? So Melinda agrees, by the way. She said it's not particularly hard. There are enough and more tools in the market. So she creates a very nice list of evaluation parameters for the OKR tool that she is going to choose or recommend. And it's an awesome list, right? It covers very nice visualizations, multiple views. The CEO has his own dashboard or her own dashboard. The VPs have their own views where they can look at their entire hierarchy. You've got integrations that brings in data from all these execution systems, and it'll tell you when the OKRs were updated. It provides the feature of check-in policing. This is my word. So check-in policing really means that check-in policing means that you should keep track of when people are updating their OKRs and make sure that you follow up, right? And if people miss check-ins, then the system sends automated reminders and follow-ups. So this, you may or may not be surprised, but this is very often the starting point for most tool searches. And what I want to do is maybe share a little bit about what else you need to think about. I'm not saying these things are not important, but there are lots of other things which are more critical to the successful rollout and implementation of your OKR program. What happened at ABC once Melinda's chosen a tool with all those very nice criteria that she set up is they had to implement an IT project in order to set up the implementations, making sure that everything's tied very nicely to the execution engine and programs that are happening in the background. And so people are happy, reviews are smooth, data is updated, everyone can look at the progress. Unfortunately, and this happens in just so many of these OKR implementations that we worked on customers with, is that if you take this approach to choose a particular tool, and it could be any tool, and it's not the tool's fault, and we'll come to that in a little bit. It's that ABC's projects and programs continue to be green as reported by the project managers, but the OKRs continue to be red. Now, why? Because I thought we had already defined outcomes, and those outcomes were working very nicely towards aligning the entire organization in one direction. Excuse me. To understand why this is happening, we need to understand the environment in which we are operating. So, and this is one of my favorite slides. If you've ever heard me speak, I always tend to bring this in. And this is a structure called Kinefin. Please do Google it. It's remarkably insightful. What it essentially talks about is that all of us operate in certain habitats. And the habitats that we typically can operate in could be simple, where there are best practices in order to succeed in what you've set out to do. There are also habitats that are called complicated, and in complicated habitats, you do have good practices. You may no longer have best practices, but you do have good practices. And what these good practices enable you to do is take several things that are simple and really scale them. A lot of construction work can be predicted in advance in terms of what material is needed, what schedules are needed, and what the tolerances are needed for a particular construction to be successful. And construction problems are often complicated problems. Now, software in particular resides in a domain called complex. I won't talk about chaos, though gaming companies often seem to appear to operate there. But I think a lot of us in our existing environments, in our existing markets, are dealing with complex problems. And a feature of complex problems is that there is no best practice or good practice. What you do need to do is look at emerging practice, and this emerging practice does emerge from the actions that the company takes. To give you a simple example, you have a market that does not hasn't changed. Perhaps it's very, very highly regulated. And even though there might be enormous detail that goes into operating in that market, it would still be considered complicated. What happens with complex market is that you put something out there and the market responds in a way that cannot be completely predicted a priori. That's a function of these markets. And a lot of us operate in organizations in markets that are complex, which means that there is a good element of path dependency. What is created is fundamentally an outcome of what we do and the response of all the other players and the consumers in the market. I'm not going to spend more time on this, but I do recommend that if you're interested, please go take a look at it. But a reason why so many companies are now coming to OKRs and seeing that as a sort of an improvement in how they are operating is actually because they are working in complex environments. If they were working in, let's say, complicated environments, they would see that putting tanks on the border would result in the outcomes that they derive, because there are excellent good practices that can be followed to be successful in those market, right? And the people who face the activity outcome disconnect are actually those who are operating in complex environments. In our military example, there's a disconnect in the movement of the tanks or the Air Force and the actual battlefield victory. And that's true of us in our markets as well. If there is a change, though, one question that I get all the time is, big deal, right? We'll just set a revised goals and objectives. We'll assign it to the right people in the tool. How hard is it? Because it's actually reasonably trivial to create new objectives and just add new people to it, right? Now, the operation is easy, but the ability to set up those goals and actually succeed at those goals, it is hard, but it is hard for a different reason. And the reason for that is essentially optionality. What does optionality mean? Optionality means that if your plans are set in advance and that plan does not survive contact with reality, especially if you've set OKRs over the period of a year, you will need a plan B. You may even need a plan C or a plan D. Now, the time to come up with these plan B, C's, and D's is not when plan A has failed. Unfortunately, if you look at the discussion so far, everything that Melinda and ABC have done is that they have taken a certain plan and said that this is the plan that we're going to operate. And by running all these projects and running all these initiatives, we have a great chance of achieving our outcomes. Now, when that plan A changes, people tend to start asking, okay, what do we do then? Because the OKR method is making it very, very obvious that the current projects and initiatives are not moving the needle on the objectives and key results. So optionality means that we need to have prepared a priori our plan Bs and Cs and Ds. Obviously, no company has the resources to fund all four of these options. They've chosen to go with option A because they actually believe that that is the best way of achieving their business goal. When they see that that is not moving the needle, they need to have created some sort of thinking, some sort of skill, and some sort of tests around whether options B, C, and D are actually viable or even possible, right? And it also demands that different areas come together on projects and tasks different to the ones that were initially planned. So the minute you have plan A failing, that's when some of the tools and the way they're being set up more correctly, you begin to see trouble. Because now work is suddenly beginning to happen outside the OKR tools. Because there were a certain set of integrations you were pulling data in, but suddenly there are these new projects being created, new Tiger teams being created, new test campaigns being run in the market. And a lot of those aren't the same ones that were prepared when you set up your OKR tool in the beginning of the year. And so suddenly the integrations aren't as cool as everybody thought they were in the beginning. Now, Melinda's problem essentially is that by the time an OKR is not moving, it's already too late for other options, right? And the reason I love the military analogy, though I'm a pacifist and fairly horrified by the thought of war, is because militaries do a great job of preparing for these eventualities. And they are the ones who've been in complex environments for a significant part of their history, right? So they use the concept of war games. And what they do with war games is say that here's our plan A. We're going to put 1,000 tanks at the border. And if that doesn't work, what happens? If they get stuck in the mud, if it rains, then the tanks can't move. Then what's our plan B? And they war game scenarios down to perhaps 5 or 6 levels and create scenarios where we can say, hey, can we call upon this particular resource to help us in case our plan A and A.1 and A.3 don't necessarily play out? What is that? What is the equivalent of that for us, right? Because obviously we're not doing war games. One, there's no reason why we can't use war games as a scenario. But in the OKR community, the thing that's becoming pretty popular is the concept of pre-mortems. A post-mortem is something that happens when something has already failed, right? And we try to understand and learn lessons from it. But a pre-mortem is when we get together and we look at what are all the ways that this particular project, this particular campaign can fail. And then we start creating a priori spikes, technical spikes, experiments, and test campaigns. What these do is give us some information about whether plan B or plan C is one feasible, two, if it shows promise. So that often means that while everybody's focused or the organization's resources are focused on plan A, there is a substantial resourcing that has been provided for the other plans as well, in case plan A doesn't work out. So what does that mean for you when you're setting up an OKR tool? So while beautiful visualizations don't hurt, but the focus on visualizations, integrations, updating it, usage and adoptions become less important in complex markets compared to the idea of having losable bets, of having resilience indices, meaning how many sub-plans do you have, how many experiments are running for this particular objective. You also need to start looking at if there is dependency between the various objectives that you've set out, because it's very rare that one group can achieve a major objective on its own. The minor ones they can handle by themselves, but any major objective that actually moves the needle for the business needs multiple groups which have traditionally operated as silos to work very, very closely together. Also objectives, and we'll talk about how some people have linked it to bonuses. And some of the thinking around that is that you should not link your objectives to bonus or financial payouts at all. That isn't reasonable, right? I mean, there are some objectives that you do commit to. This is my perspective. And so what I recommend typically is that you talk about objectives that are committed. You then talk about learning objectives. And there are also some objectives that you classify as aspirational objectives. Putting aspirational and learning objectives very, very explicitly helps us create an environment where people are learning, they're taking risks, and they know that there are losable bets, which are small bets, right? So they don't significantly hurt the organization, but these losable bets really work on creating that resilience so that there are options which are laid out, which are proven when your first option does not move the needle. So part of some of our tools also support indicators that says, have there been significant change in the market conditions? Because that gives you a sense of whether your complicated environment is becoming a complex environment. So the next wave of OKR tools, in my mind, are the ones that are moving away just from having the ability to have your OKRs, execute those OKRs, update them, which are all solved problems, right? And to looking forward and being able to say how many pilots or losable bets are you running, what's your learning index, how many of your objectives are actually learning objectives. um, I want to talk a little bit about rocket ships, simply because of the way um, software projects in particular, have traditionally been managed and executed, and that's true even from every document, right, from PMI onwards. We always focus on the reds, right? We say that, okay, we're running 17 projects, 15 of them are green, there's one that is red, and there's one that's amber or yellow. And everybody's attention immediately goes to the one that is amber and red. It's different for OKRs. Often, a company's objectives may be met by certain objectives that outperform. It is not realistic or feasible that every objective will always meet what it sets out to do. But particularly if you have objectives around sales and markets and growth and things like that, you may have certain divisions of the company that are rocket ships. And these rocket ships are objectives and key results that are significantly outperforming. The reason OKR tools need to highlight this is that by adding gasoline, whatever sort of financial gasoline or attention gasoline that is needed and is provided to this particular objective, that has the potential to significantly help the company overachieve at the company objectives level, right? But unfortunately, too much of our focus is entirely around the objectives that lag, and in trying to be able to bolster those or increase the progress of those. And tooling, I think, needs to project that these are the ones that are rocket ships. These are the ones that will actually help you outperform on your plan. I also love the connectedness index. What the connectedness index says is that how many of these objectives really have multiple people that who need to come together across departments for it to work and for it to be successful. The final thing, and I'm seeing a lot of tools beginning to now put this together for OKRs, is to be able to say, can we do a dipstick of the energy index of the team? One of the things that I like to do from my days as an agile coach is I would ask in every retrospective what the team's energy was on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being absolutely top notch, and 1 being, oh my God, why am I even here? And the aggregation of that energy index for a team often gave me a huge amount of valuable information, not as a hard indicator, but it tells you how a particular team or a group that has been assigned to an objective or a key result is feeling. And when you begin to see things like confidence indicators and energy indices going down, I think there is a fairly good correlation between the ability of that team to really be able to be successful at their objectives. However, this is still a very evolving area. I think we are still trying to figure out how we can bring this in. It's not a science yet. It's very much in the art mode. So through the looking glass, I just want to make a few predictions and then spend a few minutes on some of the favorite questions that I've got from all these companies that we have worked with. And so we'll spend the next 5 to 7 minutes on that, and then we will open it up for questions. I just want to say that the chat is open already. So if you have any questions from anything that's come up from the discussion so far, please do go ahead and start putting your questions in. Once I finish with the remaining 3 or 4 slides, what we'll do is we will start going through those and talk about them. A very timely or a very popular topic of discussion in OKR forums right now is the role of AI. And that's perhaps not true not just of OKRs, but almost every other area as well in project management. So what is AI's role? What's happening? And how can it help us in our tooling? And so I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes looking through the looking glass there. One big area, as I was talking about on the previous slide, where we are bringing in data from multiple sources, that you have confidence indicators, you have the hard prediction data, you have some signals that indicate if the market has changed in the last since the last check-in, and what's the energy and the confidence of the team. Can you put all of this together and predict a priori if there is the high risk of failure for a particular objective or key result? And that's one area where AI is being applied. I think a lot of work is happening around being able to train it on all the past data, but I'm not sure if it's there yet. But this is something that that we in the product community for OKR products will focus on, because the holy grail, of course, is to be able to predict failures, right? That you may have a objective that seems to be on track, but there are all these signals underlying it which are predicting trouble down the road, and that's what we are looking out for. Even further out, right? One of the things that I talk about to my peers is AI as an OKR coach. That will the advances in AI really make it feasible for it to give you feedback as you perhaps enter an objective or a key result into the system, and that again is slightly further out. So I'm not going to go deeper into that unless there is interest. So last 2 slides before we go into questions. One thing that I find very interesting, and I've got a lot of questions on, is what should be the visibility of OKRs in an enterprise, right? If you look at the theory of OKRs, often what happens is everybody recommends just make OKRs visible to everybody in the organization. It really helps in alignment and things like that. My favorite way to achieve some sort of limiting when it comes to objectives is just to have a lock objective. The minute you do a lock objective, that particular OKR and none of the others essentially become visible only to the set of people who are explicitly invited. And for everything else, there is general visibility, perhaps not general editability. The final item I wanted to cover on OKRs and tools is linking OKRs to bonuses, right? What we often do is that we say, particularly for sales teams, which have very, very clearly defined outcomes, and those outcomes often directly become OKRs in the system. My my thought and advice here for anyone who might ask or listen is really to be able to separate out the type of objectives. I'm not of the thought process that you must keep these two completely distinct and different, because when you have a committed OKR, it's often okay to link financial rewards and performance to it. But if you have a aspirational OKR, a learning OKR, or a pilot, or a losable bet, then those are the ones that you definitely do not want to link the people's bonuses to. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I've now spoken exactly for 40 minutes, and I'm going to open the floor up for questions.
All right, folks. Avinash, thanks for a fascinating talk. People on the webinar, I'd like to invite you all to ask any questions that you have on the session and this amazing presentation that Avinash just went through. I'd like to welcome those of you whom I can recognize. Glad to see you there, Yvette, Mike. Great to have you there. So Avinash, while people are sort of coming up with their questions, I'd like to start with one of my own. It's more of a comment than a question. I love the war games or the war analogy. One of my bosses used to ask this question: that how long is a war strategy or a war plan? How long is it valid? And the invariable response to that question was, as soon as the first soldier or the first piece of equipment had moved into the war, it was no longer valid because the war had begun and everything had already started to change. So whether it was plan A, B, C, D, or 8.1, A1, A.1, A.2, etc., the absolute necessity to have the alternate plans and alternate strategies pre-defined, pre-planned is, I guess, critical in any kind of an environment. So I love that analogy.
The only thought I had on that is that has almost become the feature of any complex market that we are operating in, because there's just so much competition, so many different players, is that the minute you move the first soldier onto the battlefield, there are just so many other players as well who will respond. That is what increases the dynamism of the entire situation.
Absolutely. The other thought that I had was that as we know, we talk a lot to our customers, and there is this whole discussion on people and teams having a sense of purpose. Not only for what they do themselves and what they want in general out of their own personal lives, but also the purpose in terms of how aligned it is to the company's purpose and the company's objectives. Where does that fit in terms of how a team should look at providing visibility to OKRs for people who are on the teams delivering these projects, and to the leadership who is defining these OKRs and want to know how well are they being achieved or how well are they being met?
Sure, absolutely. Today, unfortunately, we've compartmentalized and siloed our teams a fair bit. We've, in our minds, we think about a team being defined by the project that they are working on or the particular activity that they are performing, rather than linking that directly to the outcome or the benefit that the organization gets. It's a non-trivial change, right? And OKR implementations are the successful ones are significantly difficult and disruptive to status quo, because what OKRs do is take groups of people and say, you are now working to achieve that particular outcome. Once teams get used to it, and I actually think this is a very, very enabling thing for those teams, and people do enjoy doing that rather than just the daily project execution, is that they need to keep leadership they need to keep leadership abreast of everything that's happening, both the good and the bad, in terms of moving in that direction. What this also means is that larger projects get broken down into smaller ones, and you're running multiple experiments, and you're then backing the experiment that really wins. And so it's no longer about having this one defined plan A, but your plan is to go with A, B, C, D in a little bit, see which one has traction, which one has is making progress, and then back that as the main plan for the year. So it's a more fluid, a more dynamic way of working with respect to the conversation flows and things like that. And but that's what I think makes it very enabling and energizing for teams.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, one of the examples that we have from our customers is a large, probably the largest retailer in the country, who were primarily a brick and mortar company, and when the pandemic hit, they almost overnight. I mean, for the largest, when we met them first, they were about 1,000 stores across the country, and they were looking to celebrate their 1,000th store opening right after we met them. This was in April, I think, of 2019. And when the pandemic hit, they had to change their strategy, and they were using one of our products, Swift Kanban, for managing their OKRs and the strategic initiatives that they're running based on those OKRs. And they were able to reorganize completely in order to redefine themselves as a e-retailer, and using the help of their partners who were essentially NGOs and nonprofits of various kinds, train resellers across the country, retailers across the country, to be able to get on their platform and convert almost their entire business to being an e-commerce company. And it was an amazing sort of amazing process of reorienting an entire large organization using their OKRs and the overall strategies they defined, and being able to come up with a plan B, or I don't know how many plans they had in order to get there. So yeah, absolutely. You need to have that visibility both ways. I wanted you to bring up that Slido screen, if you still have that, just to get a sense of what folks said about their experience with OKRs. And to people on the webinar, would love to hear your comments on those of you who've had some experience with it. Love to hear your comments on what you see in your organizations about the sort of alignment of OKRs to the project that are done to implement or to achieve those OKRs. Avinash, there's a question from Gautam. Any pitfalls on OKRs that we need to consider while setting the objectives? So any things to sort of watch out for?
Sure. So I have put up the slide, Mahesh, so for everyone to take a look at, and you'll see that a lot of people are new or are starting. To Gautam's question, I think the adoption phase can seem deceptively easy, that you have your OKRs defined, you put them out on a tool, and you start updating it, and you think that you're now using OKRs. But the true value of the method, and the true value of optionality and wargaming and pre-mortems and all the associated thought process around OKRs really shine when it actually comes under stress, when plan A comes under stress. And many people at that time often say that, oh my God, we did everything right. We set up OKRs, but we still aren't moving the needle. Therefore, we're not doing it right, or OKRs isn't the method for us. That I think is a huge pitfall. The amount of people who set up OKR programs and then abandon them, or it kind of stagnates or dies, is just remarkably high. So that is definitely something that I would point out as a pitfall as you start your journey.
Awesome. Hopefully, Gautam, that answers your question. While we are looking at other questions, Avinash, do you have recommendations on what people should read for learning about OKRs?
Right. I think the OKR, obviously the original John Doerr book is a great starting point, but um, that doesn't cover a lot of evolution that has happened, which is practice-based evolution. The books give you an extremely good grounding on the theory of OKRs, but I would recommend that you follow the blogs of practitioners, and there's just so many out there. You'll find them fairly easily. And if you follow those, and I'll shamelessly plug for the articles that we have on our Nimbleworks site as well. But if you follow those, they will give you the thinking evolution as well as the latest practices that practitioners are doing. Because at the end of the day, that is what you really need, right? You need hard-won advice from the trenches in order for you to get help on succeeding with your own journey.
Yeah, and thanks for suggesting the Nimbleworks blog. We do have some good articles there. There is a question from Harihara: how to link the outcomes at group level and at org level, as it may not be visible. So typical challenges of a larger organization where you have multiple levels and the way that you configure the OKRs. How do you provide visibility?
And this is me speaking, right? So this is I'm a little less rigid and prescriptive in terms of those linkages. There may be org level OKRs that are being driven directly by fairly small projects, which may be team level projects. So in my mind, I don't classify initiatives and projects as being company level, LOB level, or team level, whatever your preferred 3 or 4 levels are. But for each of these levels, right, my only recommendation would be to link with the project that is really driving progress. To your question around, or the part of the question around linking groups with the company, right? Often the company, all it has to do is do roll-ups. And I think it's a good practice that you actually define some company level objectives, which are simply roll-ups of your group level objectives. And you link the projects to those group level objectives so that the progress really rolls up.
Absolutely.
Okay, yep, I'm looking at that question, Mahesh. I think you're looking at that question as well.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Which is the decision process to switch from a plan A to plan B. Are they predefined that you're going to turn around? No. The switch from plan A to plan B is often organic. In companies that do OKRs really, really well, what people often do is that they have multiple projects which are all partially funded. I don't mean the organizations being stingy with them. What I mean is that you've set, let's say, 4 different options, and you say, I'm going to fund these for a month or for a quarter and see how they are progressing. And I think it will become very obvious very soon that some of those are clearly doing better than the others, and that becomes plan A. The minute you have a priori, you've defined a plan A, and you're saying, we're going to bet most of our money on plan A, but we have plan B and plan C just in case. That model is less successful than if you had 4 candidates, you backed each of them for a bit, saw which one was succeeding, and then turned that into plan A, if that makes sense.
I think there are a couple of challenges that we have sort of frequently seen. One is the what is known as the sunk cost fallacy, right? You gone after plan A, and then to make a decision to actually move out of that is so hard.
Yep.
And people say, hey, we've already spent money on this, let's just continue that.
Yes.
The other is, and I don't know if you've seen some specific examples, if you will, so you have a project that's going on and you want to see what's the impact on business. The time taken to measure impact on business can be substantially higher than the time it takes to do the project. And so by the time you've seen that, is it already too late to then switch to a plan B of a project, or how do people balance the project execution to the business outcome measurement?
Sure. If you have linked your project execution to a business outcome measurement, then you are in a way expecting that there will be immediate progress. There will be, at least in the short term, running a campaign will result in increased website visits or increased conversions, for example. If the link between a project execution and the outcome moving is very long, I would say that that's not a candidate where you should do that association. That becomes a project that you need to execute, but you're also taking other actions on top of that to make sure that you can see either as a leading or a lagging indicator that your OKRs are moving or not.
Right. There is a question about OKRs for org and project level. This is something that I've seen also. People get confused about what is the so you have objectives and key results, and are the key results the objectives for the teams below? That hierarchy is not very clear.
Right.
So do we need to have an individual level OKRs? Will it work up to roll up for projects and team? What is the way that things roll?
There are several companies that use individual level OKRs as well, but the most common configuration is to have company level objectives, LOB level objectives, line of business or group level objectives, and team level objectives, a 3-level hierarchy. You can name them or call them whatever you want. Now, if you notice, I said objectives and not key results. The key results are specific to an objective. So there are organizations that do roll up of objectives, which means that the South Zone can have a target of 1 million, East, West, North, South, Central, all 1 million each, which means that the org sales target can be 5 million. So essentially, you've rolled up your objectives. However, your key result measurements are specific to that particular objective. So it actually simplifies things, right? That objectives can cascade, they can roll up. They don't have to though, right? But it is, I've seen that people do use it as cascading objectives, but there is no such thing as cascading key results.
Right. All right. So looks like there are no other questions. We are kind of at the top of the hour here in India. So if there aren't any other questions, then, okay, there is one last question. Let's take that. How often we need to revalidate the objectives? I guess that's a good, very good, practical question.
Yes, and I think my recommendation is that a quarter is usually, if I were to pick a number, a month is too short, a year is too long. A quarter is often a good time to sit and reflect and revalidate. Obviously, if it is still going to, if it is still valid and still on track, then you can just continue with those objectives, or you can also choose to make modifications and updates. If you do define objectives for a quarter, that helps because you're not then setting objectives for a year and then modifying them every quarter. You can instead set objectives for a quarter, and you can then look at the entire thing at the end of the year to see how much was planned and how much was achieved.
Perfect. All right. Great.
Okay.
I think let's wind up here. I don't think there are any more questions. To all the folks on the webinar, thank you for attending, and really grateful for your time. If you have any questions as a follow-up, please do let us know, and we'll be happy to answer them. Avinash, thanks for a great talk, and as always, enjoyable. Folks, so a couple of you asked the question. I think we responded as well, but we will be sharing a recording of the webinar. So those of you who might have missed the early part, no worries. You will be able to see the whole session in a follow-up email. Once again, thanks a lot for attending today's webinar, and we will be back within a month with the next one. Till then, stay tuned. Thanks a lot again. Avinash, any final words?
No, wonderful being here and having these conversations as always. I always wonder, if there will be about the type of questions that come, but as always, very, very practical, very insightful questions at the end, and that is a learning for me as well. It's always Absolutely. A pleasure to do these sessions.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks a lot, everybody. Good night, good day, and we'll